So I'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, so one of the issues that we have in the United States is our legal system has exempted certain groups from AML responsibilities that FATF and other countries will look at. Attorneys, accountants, brokers, hedge funds, that sort of thing are among that. Um, Dealers in luxury goods. Uh, and obviously, banks aren't very happy about that. But, we don't have much of a say when it comes to those kind of laws. Uh, but the problem that leaves with the banks is, since there's known gaps in the US regulatory environment, we have to watch those customers much more carefully, because there is a recognized possibility of using those business sectors for laundering money, and they're not under reporting obligations in the United States. So we have heat maps for those. The other thing is, and we saw this in the one MDB case, is people like Jolo or other money launderers very much know which groups are exempted. And so they will naturally gravitate to those exempted groups and move as much money as they can through that. Jolo is a master of that. He actually knew the regulations probably better than most of our line examiners with the OCC or the Federal Reserve. And so, we have to look at it. And in this case, we're doing two axes. One would be, well, we're doing the population from what I would call the gatekeeper business sector, and there's different ways that we define them from our KYC system, or actually from activity and that sort of thing. Uh, and you have to exercise a lot of care that you're building that portfolio right, because if you're only relying on KYC system, you could have a lot of false positives and false negatives until you cleanse that data. But once you have that population, then you run it through the axis. And in this case, the axis we chose was, we were looking at gatekeepers that had a high percentage of cross-border wires into or out of the United States. So make it up. Let's say you have a lawyer that 90% of his activity is with outside the United States, and perhaps a really high risk corruption country. And then we look at the country risk of that. So if you have a lawyer who has a lot of wires with Equatorial Guinea, that's going to be in the red dot at the upper right hand corner. You have a whole bunch of your gatekeepers that never have any cross-border wires at all, and so hopefully they'll be in the lower left-hand corner, and probably clustered more than I have it here. And then you always have some that are in the middle, and you have to do a one-time review that you put into a reference table and reuse it. But this is a pretty good example of how you're taking a particular business problem, you are putting some thought into what the population is that you're going to pull. Once again, you have to be very, very careful in how you do it, and you're not making undue assumptions on the purity of that information. But you can, after a couple of times, you can actually get better quality information. You just have to work at it. And then what we do is we have the two axis for our risk proxies. And then you go. And we spend a lot of time on the cross-border wires looking at country risk of the counterparty, as opposed to country risk of our gatekeeper customer, who most of the time would be in the United States. But it doesn't do me any good if I have an attorney in the United States who's dealing with a counterparty in Equatorial Guinea or in an offshore financial center.
Right. And about the corruption risk, right, for the country, generally we would use the Transparency International Index.
You could, and that would be probably a starting spot for me. But if I was in Bangladesh, or a similar country, and I was looking at this, um, uh, designing my access, I would actually ironically make the United States and the UK and similar countries, Switzerland, um, as ultra high risk. And so, ironically, if I was in Bangladesh and I saw an individual sending money to an attorney in the US, even though the US, has a moderately good Transparency International score, uh, I would say the US has known gaps with respect to their attorneys or dealers or that sort of thing. And so, I would be viewing the US or the UK as ultra high risk. And, as you well know from all the time we spent on one MDB, that's exactly what Jolo was doing.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, great discussion on that. Thanks, Tom.